Identity politics is the squabbling and pissing matches brought about by people sparring over representation and interpreting society in terms of gender, race, and sexuality. There is identity politics in academia and corporate branding, but one of the biggest battlegrounds is entertainment, where ideology has spurred new rules and new norms. First, there is the alternative realities of colourblind-casting. We're witnessing an expansion of who is able to depict white characters and real-life white historical figures, no matter how incongruous, from an Indian Sir Isaac Newton to a black Achilles to a black Anne Boleyn, to a Sri Lankan Peter Pan and Black Tinkerbell, to an Indian David Copperfield, to a Puerto Rican Alf, to a Colombian Snow White, to a South Asian Velma, to a black Regency Queen of England, to a black 11th century Danish Viking. But the door of this open-mindedness only swings one way. While this expansion is occurring, the characters that white authors and screenwriters are allowed to write about is being shrunken down by publishers and film studios. This means that minority identities are increasingly off-limits to white people because they are forged in part by the biases and travails of being non-white, while whiteness as an identity seemingly has less or no comparable threshold for a non-white author or actor to meet. In this prevailing mindset, whiteness is not so much a distinct thing as a generic persona, a basic bitch homo sapien, an off-the-rack, default settings, standard issue carbon-based lifeform. A South Asian Sir Isaac Newton? Of course, such roles ought to be open to capable actors, and it's exclusionary to question such progress. A white writer depicting a South Asian protagonist? That's out of bounds, and unmarketable, and you need to examine your outdated ways of thinking. Guardian variety whiteys are being routed by a synchronized pincer maneuver, being lectured by DEI junkies, and suffocated by a gaseous attack of queef smog from one flank, and by a cavalry of wrist-slapping concupiscent cuck allies on the other. The other major element of identity politics and entertainment is gender. Weird things have been happening with femininity. After a decade or two of trying to deconstruct differences in gender, because such differences, according to progressive theorists, are socially constructed, and therefore uphold hierarchies in society that hold women back, there is a drive in Hollywood, paradoxically, of creating and forefronting female characters who meet masculinity on its own terms, replicating or outdoing the traditional masculine characteristics and tropes they've been trying to expose as just gender constructs. Stoicism, emotional inaccessibility, a volatile temper, staunchness, patronizing social dominance. So if these are socially constructed male characteristics that need to be broken down for the sake of removing the traditional expectations and toxic traits young men feel they have to inhabit, and which inhibits them from realizing their true, more sensitive, more empathetic, and less identifiably gendered selves, then why the fuck are you creating female characters and charging them up to 11 with those very masculine characteristics you've spent decades rolling your eyes at? Here's the strange paradox. If Galadriel from the Rings of Power were a male character, female writers and critics would almost certainly deride him as an emotionally shut-off, obnoxious, time-warp macho character, who was, in fact, almost a parody of dated traditional masculinity. But as a female protagonist with these characteristics, she's a progressive, empowered character. As well as this, most of these strong female characters are kind of sexless, and certainly don't have relationships, as if relationships are compromising to their independence and strength. Weirder still, this isn't what female audiences react to. The Marvels flopped. Barely 37% of Rings of Power viewers finished watching the season. Yet when a strong female superhero character like Wonder Woman also has some sensual and sensitive vulnerabilities and is open to exploration of those feelings and fully fledged romance, it crushes at the box office. We have a new category, history jacking. This is when the poor past, which was just minding its own business, experiences the equivalent of a carjacking, where the historical narrative is dragged out by its hair, with the engine still running, and overweening modern screenwriters take the wheel. This isn't from an impulse to correct the record, of bringing to light narratives and biographies overlooked and marginalized by the history books. No, this is about imposing shit that wasn't there, or augmenting stuff in a phony and stylized way, using the literal historical record not as a set thing, but as a template, which a user can alter, personalize, and enhance. History is something that you can add patches and plugins to, which you can upgrade. In the minds of these writers, the past is something you can retrofit, because much of it was bad and exclusionary, so history is better served by being streamlined into a kind of endlessly rolling, synchronized equivalent of the present in terms of demographics. There is fiction set not so much in our world, but in what passes for our world. Ryan Murphy's Netflix show Hollywood featured several real-life celebrities, directors, and agents in post-war Tinseltown. Their biographies intentionally pumped full of untruths to suit the series' alternate history, which imagines how life might have been different for queer, black, and brown entertainers if racism and homophobia were not barriers to their success. Actresses who didn't win Oscars do, closeted actors are public about their sexuality. A sobering and poignant reflection on the iniquities of the past framed in an audaciously matter-of-fact way. Not really, more a supercilious reverie that clumsily doesn't account for culture as a medium through which people form and express their identities by navigating prevailing attitudes. The same dynamics apply in Bridgerton, which is set in Regency Britain. Black characters are introduced in a seemingly egalitarian alternative reality, only to have that abruptly reversed when the show reveals there is racist sentiment after all. The showrunners want to present people of color as empowered, but also empower them to overcome bias, which means the characters are inhabiting a kind of socio-cultural multiverse. In Queen Charlotte, Britain's racial divide is vanquished overnight within the space of a dance to a string arrangement of an Alicia Keys track. With one party, George tells Charlotte, "We have created more change, stepped forward more than Britain has in the last century." It's a puerile, flaky load of bollocks. There are a host of identity politics concepts in entertainment. One I call iteration and also. Instead of just having gender or race-swapped iterations of an otherwise default intrinsic character, these new iterations are also the character. Miles Morales is also Spider-Man. Sam Wilson is also Captain America. There is also co-opt and transcend. This is when a girl does it better than a male predecessor or previous male archetype. Ironheart is younger and even more of a tech prodigy genius than Iron Man. Sabine learns to master the Force even quicker and more fabulously than Luke Skywalker. There is also the source material double act, relying on a pre-existing property to garner a loyal audience based on name recognition, but also being so empowered and part of a brave new cultural world that you will snub the source material as an expression of being unconfined by stale old ideas and attitudes. In other words, being too cavalier to read the fucking comics or source material, as stated blithely by some of the writers of Black Widow, of WandaVision, of Shang-Chi, of The Eternals, of She-Hulk, and Secret Invasion. Also, there is the idea of authenticity over personality. Rather than believing you are what you do, you are good because of what you are. In the estimation of modern writers, Echo is fundamentally good because it is an authentic representation of what the deaf, female, Native American amputee character is, over their acts or decisions or character arc, or how compelling they are as a protagonist. Next is meritocracy of virtue over plain meritocracy. Charmin Obey-Chenoy is brought into helm a new Star Wars movie, despite practically no evidence with a multiplex entertainment feature, no prior interest in the franchise, and no transferability of her skills and passions as a documentarian of the plight of women in Pakistan. For all of this, it's important to pick your battles, and not be doctrinaire. Not all race swaps are bad. Nick Fury was a white character before Samuel L. Jackson owned the role, and Angaboda is a kind of alien identity in a fantasy realm, and it doesn't matter too much. However, Hollywood needs to rethink the attitude toward identity politics, because diversity and inclusivity are fine per se, but not in ways that are contextually incoherent. That's not progressive empowerment. That's indulgent, weird, and flaky relativism. It's also costing them a shitload of money, because their ideas and their content isn't connecting. Don't reimagine, just imagine. Respect historical context. Respect source material. Develop a diversity of entertainment, not a homogeneous approach to all entertainment. Make the audience stirred by your imagination and your characters, not by great heavy shovelfuls of testimony to progressive ideas. As for the green-faced witch in the video thumbnail, yes, the character is green, so it technically could be played by an actor from any background, but it's more to do with characterization. The high-strung, self-conscious, emotionally overwrought, delicate and camply expressive character traits of the witch in the stage show of Wicked are annoying, frustrating characteristics, almost invariably ascribed to annoying white chicks in musicals. the kind of histrionic white chick behavior that commonly elicits disparaging side-eye from black women. And it feels disconcerting to have a scented, poised, and sophisticated black actress trying to pull off those flaky characteristics that are shot through with embarrassingly lame whiteness. Furthermore, witches in Oz are either nice and sweet Cinderella types, which is too glaringly white a category of character and a lame, saccharine way for a black actress to look right playing, or witches are evil and nasty. In other words, a Karen. And there is nothing whiter than a Karen. No black actress should ever play a Karen. So, if we decide that a black actress would be unsuitable to play an evil witch in Oz, and also not ideally suited to playing a histrionically self-conscious nice witch who speaks in lame-sounding, overly affected and gushing white-style dialogue, then we've determined that the whole green witch thing can be judged to have a certain vibe that doesn't necessarily lend itself naturally to race-swapped diversity.